Daniel Danny Wags Fatico was the younger brother of the notorious Carmine Charlie Wagon Wheels Fatico. The Fatico brothers faction, led by Carmine, became a major presence in the Brownsville, East New York, and Canarsie sections of the borough. Danny Fatico would eventually become an inducted mafia member, as had his brother, serving as a soldier within the Albert Anastasia family. Years later, after Carlo Gambino became boss, Carmine became a capo di Decina. With this elevation, Carmine soon also elevated his beloved brother Danny to an acting captain in order to watch his back. The Fatico regime was to become a very large and active crew that was into nearly everything, from bookmaking and shylocking to armed heists and burglaries, truck hijacking, narcotics, murder, and more. There wasn't much that this bunch wouldn't indulge themselves in if there was a handy buck to be made in it. Before I continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment. The Fatico crew would groom and nurture such future top well-known mafiosi as Fat Andy Ruggiano Sr., John and Jean Gotti, Angelo Ruggiero Sr., John and Charlie Carneglia, Willie Boy Johnson, Tony Lee Guerrieri, Tony Pep Trentacosta, Albert Mayone, and Tony Roach Rampino. And there were many, many other top hoods not named. The listener should remember that back in that era, the East New York area matched, pound for pound, nearly any other section of the city for density of Italian hoodlums. The Fatico crew operated out of the notorious Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, which was originally Carmine Fatico's social club long before John Gotti became a household name. By the mid-1960s, they also operated a second satellite club by the same name after Carmine bought a home out in West Islip in Suffolk County, Long Island. Side note, with the migration to Queens of so many crew members after their Brooklyn neighborhood's ethnicity changed, Fatico and John Gotti decided to relocate their original Brooklyn clubhouse to 101st Avenue in the Ozone Park section of Queens as well. Daniel Fatico's lengthy arrest record dates to 1941 and includes such charges as felonious assault, burglary, bookmaking, operating dice games, policy, operating an illegal alcohol still, vagrancy, running a disorderly house, and hijacking. Over the next 40 years, he would pile up 20 more convictions for assault, gambling, armed truck hijackings, and fencing truckloads of stolen goods, among others. But in between all the arrests, the Fatico brothers successfully engaged in a veritable supermarket of organized crime. In 1946, Danny was charged along with an accomplice of repeatedly stabbing a man named John Minutella in the chest and abdomen, and then striking him in the head with a baseball bat after a vicious argument at a card game. In that same year, Danny was arrested for another attempted felonious assault, this time for attempting to run down a guy by the name of Michael Mentali, who accused Fatico of deliberately swerving his car and jumping the curb trying to hit Mentali. In the mid-1950s, Fatico was charged along with several others for operating a 1,000-gallon alcohol still racket out of an abandoned warehouse in Long Island City. Danny was indicted on federal alcohol tax violations, manufacture, possession, sale, and conspiracy. It was a lively little racket producing big profits until U.S. Treasury agents crashed the premises and smashed all the liquor vats and alcohol-making equipment. In 1965, the Nassau County Police Vice Squad and U.S. Treasury agents raided a deviant sex bar that catered to homosexuals named the Magic Touch Lounge in Island Park. Arrested at that time were two men who ran the club, Danny Fatico and John Vicious Vivian Vignini. Simultaneously, agents arrested a third suspect, Gambino soldier and top mafioso Eddie Dallas DeCurtis off a lower Manhattan street corner. They were each charged with multiple misdemeanor counts of keeping a disorderly house, conspiracy to keep a disorderly house, conspiracy to violate federal liquor laws, and disorderly conduct. After an extremely lengthy criminal case that lasted several years to bring to fruition, all three defendants were convicted on all charges. It turned out to be the longest non-jury trial in Nassau County's history up to that time. Danny received a 6-month sentence. In 1967, he was arrested again with Eddie Dallas DeCurtis and an individual later identified as the Queen Bee, a term used to describe the popular homosexual man who was able to attract other gays, drawing them to an entertainment venue, such as an underground bar, restaurant, or nightclub. That Queen Bee was John Vicious Vivian Vignini. Vicious Vivian was the draw who popularized that venue. In a multi-pronged follow-up undercover investigation, the three were indicted on perjury charges in regard to an arson probe after two competing cocktail lounges that also catered to quote-unquote sexual deviants was torched. The Tradewinds Lounge and the Flame, both located in the nearby town of Oceanside, were badly damaged by Molotov cocktails thrown through the business's windows to eliminate them as competition to Fatico and DeCurtis's own Island Park Club. Side note, in the late 1970s, the Fatico brothers were involved in another major federal case that would later lead to the creation of a very controversial law placed on the federal books, which the government aptly named a Fatico charge. The crux of this new law was that if prosecutors deemed it appropriate to apply in certain criminal cases where it was felt that a defendant could be proven to be an inducted mafia member after conviction but before sentencing before the judge, prosecutors could then submit to the court an application to hold a Fatico hearing. This was a potentially dangerous charge for a defendant to face because upon conviction of such a charge, the sentencing judge was then compelled to increase penalties of up to 10 years additional to any original sentence he would have handed down. Dangerous indeed. If granted, prosecutors would then use physical surveillance and audio tapes if available, mob informers, FBI agents and police intelligence experts, and racket squad officers to get on the witness stand to testify as to a defendant's mafia membership. At that point, it was a complete kangaroo court and a stacked deck against any defendant with an Italian last name. These expert witnesses were typically taken at their word, and it was usually curtains after that when standing before the judge. In 1977, the Fatico brothers were charged as the leaders of an active hijack theft ring operation preying on freight hauling companies at the JFK airport. Danny and Carmine were accused of having orchestrated a series of armed holdups of expensive cargo, including stealing 3 truckloads of furs and precious zinc alloy bars from freight trucks out of JFK. After a lengthy trial that ended in a mistrial after a jury deadlock, Carmine and Danny pled guilty and a deal worked out with prosecutors to 1 count of conspiracy to possess a load of furs from a foreign shipment. The main prosecution witness was a former Colombo family associate named Salvatore Montella, better known as Sonny Black, who fancied himself a bit of a tough guy. He was formerly loosely affiliated with Colombo capo Sonny Francis and his Long Island regime. After Sonny was imprisoned for 50 years on a bank robbery conspiracy conviction, Montella quickly gravitated to Carmine Fatico and the Gambino family. He started hanging around the Bergen Club and started bringing street deals to Charlie and Danny Wagons. But as soon as Montella was arrested for operating an unrelated burglary heist ring, he turned rat and offered up the Fatico brothers on a platter to the FBI in the hopes of buying his freedom. After he hung the mafiosi brothers with his courtroom testimony, he quickly disappeared forever into the newly formed WITSEC program, the fledgling Singing Rodent Relocation Service started only a few years earlier. Prior to sentencing, the Faticos had objected to their pre-sentencing reports labeling them as made members of the mafia, and upper echelon members at that. This court dispute and the subsequent hearings caused by it is what would later develop into what became the well-known court proceedings referred to as a Fatico hearing. In 1976-77, Danny was arrested by the feds a second time in New York's Eastern District after a gambling raid on a major floating dice game he operated. Among all the other defendants arrested, Fatico was the only one charged with maintaining the game, which is a potentially heavy count. It was a popular high-stakes craft game frequented by wise guys across the city, where it was not uncommon to see $50,000 and $100,000 wagered on a single roll. Backed by the hierarchy of the family, top members of the Brigada such as Neil Delacroce and Carlo Gambino himself had been partners. Famed prosecutor Thomas Puccio, who later became a criminal defense attorney, oversaw this case personally. Infamous defense attorney Rory Cohn led the team that represented Fatico. So it was the big guns out on both sides. Fatico was convicted after a jury trial and received a 3-year prison term. After his release from the federal lockup, Fatico semi-retired. His protege, John Gotti, had since climbed the mob's ladder under the further tutelage of their underboss, Neil Delacroce, had been formally inducted and elevated to become the capo over their old East New York Bergen crew. Gotti, of course, would go on to achieve mafia infamy as the boss of the entire Brigada after he orchestrated the assassination of former boss Paul Castellano in December 1985. As for Danny Wags, he died in 2006 at age 86. He was mostly inactive in his last years, having backed up and retired, leaving the Bergen and all that came with it in the hands of his former protege, John Gotti. If you like this story, then check out Button Guys of the New York Mafia at www.thenewyorkmafia.com to read our bio about Danny Fatico's brother Carmine and other members of the Gambino family. And please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment. Thank you for watching. Until next time.